Welcome villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I am your guide, KAGE, the creator of all the what-ifs you see on this channel, with your suggestions of course. I hope you like the video we have today. Please comment video ideas, and subscribe if you're new. Today we have part 5 of Naruto Transformers crossover, which will be the second to last part of this series, unless you want me to keep going to the next movies, but this might have to be the end. It took me a while to make, but I got to it, and I hope the end of this series will be satisfactory until I come back to this idea. Here are the shoutouts, and I want to thank all of you for commenting, and please keep doing so. And if you can support me, please do so on my Patreon, where you can subscribe for $5 to get early updates, text what-if transcripts, thumbnails, other arts, and gaming videos. The link will be in the description, so if you can, please help out. So without further ado, let's get into this what-if. Part 5, Broken Oaths. The classroom was a sprawling lecture hall, designed to accommodate over 100 students, yet it still felt cramped. Long rows of seats, each equipped with a built-in desk, ascended in tiers, ensuring every student had an unobstructed view of the front. At the base of the room stood a massive whiteboard, though the professor, an older man with a disheveled academic look, preferred chalk over technology to deliver his lectures. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper, cheap coffee, and the lingering musk of too many students crammed into one space for too long. Posters lined the walls, some depicting great philosophers and historical events, while others were just college notices no one bothered to read. Naruto sat somewhere in the middle, already restless. The artificial lighting buzzed faintly overhead, and the drone of the professor's voice blended into the background noise of rustling papers and hushed whispers. Outside, through the massive windows lining the side of the room, the world carried on, cars honking, birds flying, life moving forward at a pace Naruto was still adjusting to. Most students were focused on their laptops or scribbling in notebooks, but Naruto absent-mindedly spun a pen between his fingers, his mind elsewhere. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was just hard to sit still when the weight of the world, of a much larger mission, was pressing down on him. And it was starting to hurt. His earlier conversation with Optimus echoed in his mind, his need to act, to help his team, but being told to wait. It wasn't easy to sit still, especially when it was clear that something bigger was at play. He was glad his friends, and his old team, wanted him to have a normal life, but they knew what he could do. He should be out there, helping. Because if Megatron was back, there was no telling what could happen. Space, time, gravity. We're going on a journey together, you and I, today. All you, eager, nubile, young minds on the very cusp of adulthood. And I shall be your consort, your guide, your chaperone into the heart of darkness. Laughter rippled through the room, the professor trying to make the lecture fun. But it was clear he thought far too highly of himself. Welcome to Astronomy 101, the professor continued, but Naruto could barely hear him. His thoughts were spiraling. His mind was a whirlpool of images and noise, a constant barrage of flashes, too fast for him to process. Was this what Kurama had warned him about? Why was it so painful? The compulsion to keep his mind moving was overpowering. His thoughts grew louder, and the professor's words faded into the background. Symbols, foreign and Cybertronian in nature, flashed through his mind, attaching themselves in rapid succession. He barely had time to understand what they meant. Without realizing it, his hand moved on its own. He tried to stop, but the more the images flashed, the more his body acted without his control. Pain coursed through his limbs, a numbing sensation that made it difficult to think. His body was moving too fast for him to catch up. His book, the same one he had received when he first enrolled, was opened in front of him. He began flipping through it, moving at an absurd speed, his eyes barely registering one page before moving to the next. The symbols in his mind only sped up, more chaotic, more confusing. In mere seconds, the book was finished. Behold the work of Albert Einstein, a professor once, like moi. Energy equals mass. Naruto's hand shot up without him realizing. His blank stare betrayed the chaos unfolding in his mind, but his body moved reflexively, as though pulled by some unseen force. He didn't even notice his roommate, Leo, trying to tell him to put his hand down. Naruto could only watch as the professor eyed him for a moment, a clear sense of annoyance creeping into his gaze before he spoke. "Young man, there are no questions until I've reached the climax of my lecture." Normally, Naruto would have laughed it off, but today was different. His voice, his mind, it felt like something was taking control of him. He couldn't suppress it. "I just finished your book and there's only one problem: Einstein's wrong." He blurted out, his tone more forceful and abrupt than he was used to. The students around him burst into laughter, and Naruto mentally groaned, feeling the familiar sting of embarrassment. But his hand didn't lower. He couldn't control it. This was what Kurama had warned him about, the part of his mind he'd kept locked away. Now, it felt like he was spiraling, losing himself. How could he stop it? The laughter continued, but like a puppet on strings, Naruto found himself moving again. His body acted on its own, rushing to the front of the classroom, toward the professor's stand. Without thinking, he grabbed the whiteboard marker and chalk from behind the man and started scribbling down strange symbols, symbols that shouldn't make sense. But they did. Cybertronian symbols. As he finished, he started speaking again, his words tumbling out like a torrent. Energy equals mass times the velocity of light squared in this dimension, but what about the other 17? Nobody talks about the other 17. Here's a clear example: break down the elemental components of energon, assume a constant decay rate and extrapolate for each one. His head shifted strangely, his mouth moving in unnatural ways as his voice shifted, now speaking in Cybertronian. The words seemed to flow out before he even realized it: 14 galactic convergences. It took the Sentinel Prime expedition to receive an. He paused, his voice stumbling as he tried to piece together the unfamiliar words. Echo on its signal. You wind up with a formula for interdimensional energy increase that mass and light alone can't possibly explain. The classroom was silent, every student staring at him, their confusion growing. "Come on, guys, I can't be the only one in the class who..." Before Naruto could finish, the professor finally stepped forward, his face reddened with rage. "Young man," he growled, "I will not be punked in front of the dean." Naruto turned to face him, his mind still spinning, his head pounding. He could see the fury in the professor's eyes, but something inside him snapped. The professor's words barely registered as his anger boiled over. "No," Naruto said slowly, his voice cold and distant. "This is my universe here. Do you understand? I am the Alpha and the Omega. Get out of my class." The room erupted into the loudest round of laughter yet, the mocking sounds echoing around him, but it felt distant. He felt like he was sinking deeper into a void, every sound amplifying the pressure in his mind. The laughter reverberated, but it was now like a dull buzz in the background. Naruto's anger grew, the pounding in his head intensifying. He was losing control, but part of him didn't care. His frustration with this world, the lies, the waiting, it all came rushing to the surface. He could feel Kurama's presence, a warning in his mind, but it wasn't enough to stop the chaos building inside him. Naruto left the classroom, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. His first class in college, possibly ruined by the chaos in his own mind. Why did things always go wrong when he just wanted to be normal? He'd hoped for a few years of peace, a chance to live like everyone else, but instead, his mind was a tangled mess of symbols and pain. The cube shard was the cause of it all. He would figure this out, he had to. He just needed to find a place to sit, to gather himself. Without thinking, Naruto found himself on a bench outside, the cool air brushing against his face. But his mind refused to slow down. It was a blur of flashing images, strange symbols, and the ever-present pressure in his head. He could barely think straight. Naruto gritted his teeth as the images continued to flood his mind, each one more jarring than the last. I need to get this under control, he thought desperately. Just a simple shard from the Allspark, and it's already downloading everything straight into my brain. I can't take much more of this. He staggered to a stop in the middle of the campus, gripping the sides of his head as another wave of foreign symbols and strange blueprints flooded his consciousness. His chest tightened with the pressure, and his thoughts felt scrambled, as if his mind was trying to process data faster than it could handle. Kurama, Naruto began mentally, can you stop it? I can't keep dealing with this, just shut it down again. A long, drawn-out sigh echoed through his mind before Kurama's familiar voice rumbled back, rougher than usual. Don't even think about it, brat. There was a rare edge of fatigue in the demon fox's voice, and Naruto could almost picture Kurama rolling his eyes. You think I don't know what's going on? I'm the one who's been holding it all back for this long, keeping you from losing your mind. But now? It's too much. I can't contain it anymore. This is something beyond me, kid. Naruto cursed under his breath, hands still trembling as the symbols continued to whirl in his mind. So, it's happening whether I like it or not, huh? Kurama's voice softened, but the exhaustion was clear. Exactly. It's like trying to stop a dam from bursting when the pressure is too high. I've been trying to hold it off for as long as I could, but now that it's been triggered, there's no turning it off. It's a part of you now, Naruto. You're going to have to deal with it. Naruto swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing as he took slow steps forward. Great. Just great. I've got a shard of Cybertronian tech stuck in my head, and the best I can do is try to keep it from completely destroying me. Kurama's voice was quiet, almost reflective. You didn't ask for this, kid. But it's a part of you now. The Allspark's power and knowledge is downloading into your brain because it sees you as a vessel. It's trying to adapt itself to your mind, and in turn, it's pulling you into something much bigger than you could ever imagine. Something ancient, something far beyond what even you can understand. Naruto stopped in his tracks, looking around as if the words alone could ground him. So, what now? How do I even deal with this? You need to start preparing yourself, Kurama said, his tone turning serious. There's no avoiding it now. The more you resist, the more your mind will break under the strain. Instead, learn to embrace it, or at least control it. You don't have to figure everything out in one go, but you can't keep running away from this. Naruto clenched his fists, the pulse of anger rising in his chest, but it was laced with something else, an unmistakable determination. I'm not going to back down, Kurama. This power, whatever it is, I'm going to control it. I have to, it's not just for me anymore. That's the spirit, Kurama responded, a touch of approval breaking through the exhaustion in his voice. You were never one to back down from a challenge. But remember, this is different. Cybertronian power isn't something to take lightly. You'll have to adapt, and fast. Because there's more going on than just these flashes in your mind. Naruto took a deep breath, feeling a strange weight settle over him. I know. And I don't think this is just some random occurrence. The Allspark chose me for a reason. Whatever's coming. It's not just about me anymore. Kurama's voice hardened. Exactly. The universe doesn't just throw power at random. It's a signal. And now that you're connected to it, you're in the middle of something far bigger than any of us. Naruto nodded, his gaze hardening as his resolve solidified. Then I'll face it, whatever it is, I won't back down. He started walking again, each step purposeful as the images and symbols in his mind swirled in chaotic patterns. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear, Naruto wasn't about to let this force, whatever it was, control him. It was time to take control. Naruto's pace quickened as his mind raced. Michaela, his thoughts shifted back to her, to the shard she now possessed. If she had it, then she was a target. He had barely understood the power it held, but one thing was clear, it was tied to something far bigger than either of them. The Decepticons could find her, he thought, anxiety tightening his chest. If they knew she had the shard, she wouldn't be safe. The thought of her in danger made his stomach turn. He hadn't been there when she needed him. And now the weight of that mistake felt unbearable. He had to find her, before the Decepticons did. Michaela made her way into her father's bike shop, finally done with work for the day. As soon as she stepped inside, she couldn't help but smile. There was something comforting about being here, in this familiar space. Her eyes immediately found Bones, her large, lovable dog. She knelt down to greet him, scratching behind his collar as he eagerly leaned into her touch. "Hi, Bones," she said in her usual baby talk voice, the smile never leaving her face. Bones was just as excited to see her, his tail wagging furiously as he practically melted into her hands. "Oh, you're such a good boy," she continued, laughing softly. "What a good boy you are." "Are you hungry?" she asked, already heading for his food. Bones responded with an enthusiastic bark, making Michaela giggle under her breath. But as she prepared his meal, a sudden buzz from her phone interrupted her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, and her smile faded instantly. It was Naruto. Reluctantly, she answered the call, making sure he could hear the annoyance in her voice. "Yes, Rika," she answered, using his middle name as a subtle hint to the tone of the conversation. "Hey, Mika," Naruto greeted, his voice sounding strained. "I can already tell you're mad about me passing out on our first webcam date." Michaela scowled, her gaze drifting to the window as she rolled her eyes. "Wow, no, it's not like you didn't set up the thing. I know I messed up, and you're mad about that, but, Naruto, that's not why I'm mad," she interrupted, her voice sharp with frustration. There was a brief pause on the other end. She knew exactly what he was doing, subtly trying to figure out why she was upset. For all his power and determination, Naruto was still terrible at reading people. "I'm mad because you promised you'd take care of yourself," she continued, her tone softening only slightly. "And from what I saw on the webcam, you broke that promise." Naruto let out a noticeable sigh, which only fueled her annoyance. She could already tell he was going to sidestep the issue at hand. "I know you're worried about me," he said, his voice sounding even more strained than before. "I didn't keep my promise, but I'll make it up to you. Can we talk about that later?" Something came up. Michaela sighed, the frustration in her chest making her feel like she might explode. She knew Naruto would always dive headfirst into danger, that was just who he was. But for once, she had hoped he might have the sense to listen. Maybe she was overreacting. After all, it wasn't his fault. He didn't know when to stop, and the responsibility of saving everyone seemed to weigh on him constantly. But still, they'd have to talk about this later. "Okay, Rika," she said, still annoyed but softening with his middle name. "What's going on?" "I've been seeing Cybertronian symbols," Naruto's voice returned, suddenly serious. "The information from the cube shard is getting into my mind, crawling around, growing." Michaela's heart skipped a beat. "What, have you told the Autobots?" Or nest? No, Naruto answered, a long pause following. He sounded almost embarrassed. It didn't come up. Of course it didn't, Michaela muttered under her breath, annoyance creeping back into her tone before she let out a heavy sigh. Look, me and Kurama figured it out. It's coming from the shard. If you still have it, just lock it up, and whatever you do, don't touch it. Naruto's voice was quiet for a moment. The symbols are a lot, so I can't teleport to you right now. But once my mind clears, I'll come to you, okay? Michaela stopped, her hand frozen in midair as she set the dog food down. She glanced at Bones again, the weight of the situation settling in. Alright, just, be careful, okay, she said softly. I'll keep it safe here, but don't do anything reckless. The call ended, and Michaela sank into the chair beside her, her mind racing. What was going on with that shard? She couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to spiral out of control, and it wasn't just because of the symbols. Something bigger was at play. She just hoped Naruto could stay safe long enough for them to figure it out. Slowly, Michaela's thoughts shifted away from Naruto and were replaced by the strange sounds coming from the garage. What the hell is that, she thought, her brow furrowing. It sounded like small footsteps, as if something, or someone, was rummaging around. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as another sound echoed through the room. It was faint but distinct, enough to make her pulse quicken. With her instincts kicking in, Michaela crept toward the back of the room, grabbing a set of pliers from the workbench. Her movements were cautious, every sense alert. She paused when the sound stopped, holding her breath. Waiting. The silence was almost worse than the noise. But then, just as her nerves started to settle, another footstep echoed through the space, pinpointing the source of the disturbance. It was time to find out who, or what, was hiding in her home. Michaela's grip tightened around the pliers as her mind raced. Could it be a Decepticon? The thought sent a chill through her, but she kept her focus steady, one step at a time. She kept moving toward the source, each footstep muffled on the garage floor. Stay calm, don't jump to conclusions. The sound grew louder, and she quickly zeroed in on the noise. Just a little more, she stopped when she saw it. A small Cybertronian. No taller than her knee, scurrying around her workbench. It looked almost like a tiny RC truck, the wheels beneath it clicking faintly as it tried to fit into the safe. The shard of the Allspark, her shard, was inside. No, you don't, she thought, her stomach tightening. Before she could second-guess herself, Michaela lunged forward. In one smooth motion, she grabbed the small bot with the pliers, pinning it against the workbench with enough force to keep it still. The little thing struggled beneath her grip, its mechanical body wriggling and squirming, but Michaela held firm, pressing harder as it tried to escape. Not today, little guy, she muttered under her breath, her pulse racing as she kept the pressure on the robot. Her heart hammering. She needed answers, and she wasn't letting go until she got them. Is that the best you got, huh? Is that all you can do? The small Cybertronian rambled, its voice oddly distinct and almost mocking. Without hesitation, Michaela grabbed the blowtorch and aimed it at the bot's left optic, watching as it shriveled and blackened with the heat. What are you doing here, you little freak? She snapped, making sure the small robot knew it wasn't getting anywhere with her. That's my eye, you crazy bitch, it screamed, scrambling to replace the now burned optic with a new one, its red glow shifting to blue. Michaela paused for a moment, watching it fumble. She didn't have time for this, she had a million other things to worry about, and this wasn't one of them. You gonna talk or what? She demanded, her voice hard, tightening the grip on the pliers to add pressure. Look, Calm down, I seek knowledge from the cube, the fallen demands me. It babbled, its voice frantic. What knowledge, she shouted, frustration creeping in. I need the shard, gimme the shard, I need the shard, they're gonna whack me, I'm gonna be dead without that shard. Michaela gritted her teeth in irritation. The bot's frantic rambling was pushing her patience to the edge. With a swift motion, she yanked it up again and slammed it back down with the pliers. Easy, warrior goddess, I'm just a little salvage scrap drone, it whined, trying to wriggle free. And I'm your worst nightmare, she retorted, her voice cold. With one last, contemptuous glance at the bot, Michaela opened the safe, the very one the little con had been trying to get into. She carefully took out the Allspark shard, now sealed in a capsule, and tossed it into the safe, slamming the door shut with finality. She threw the pliers aside with a flick of her wrist, placing the capsule in her pocket. The shard was hers, and no one, Decepticon or otherwise, was getting their hands on it. Michaela stood there for a moment, her heart still racing from the encounter. The little bot's frantic words echoed in her mind, and she gripped the capsule in her pocket, feeling the weight of it press against her. She didn't trust this shard, not with what she'd just witnessed. And if the Decepticons were after it? Well, that was all the more reason to make sure it was kept safe. Naruto couldn't teleport to her. The symbols were getting to him, and she could tell just from his voice that he was struggling. If he couldn't come to her, then she'd go to him. She gave Bones one last pat on the head, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't wait around for more trouble to find her, she was already in too deep. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her jacket and threw it on. The Allspark shard securely tucked away. She wasn't sure how much time she had before things escalated further, but one thing was clear, she wasn't about to let Naruto face whatever was coming alone. Hang on Rika, she muttered to herself, feeling a mix of frustration and determination as she slipped out the back door. She would go to him. And this time, she wouldn't wait for the chaos to find her. She'd make sure she was there to face it head-on with him. She made to grab a scroll, one that Naruto had made for E.T. in the case of danger. She pocketed it along with grabbing hold of her captive. As she stepped into the cool day, the sunlight of her home stretched out before her. And with every step she took, her heart beat faster, knowing that whatever was coming, they'd face it together. Time skip. Naruto sat at his desk in his small college dorm, the room barely lit by the glow of his laptop screen. His fingers hovered over his keyboard, but his mind was elsewhere, racing, scrambling, lost in a sea of strange, flashing symbols. The symbols were all he could see, burning into his vision no matter where he looked. Each one came at him faster than the last, swirling together in a maddening dance of cryptic images. They looked like they came from another world, their patterns alien and unfamiliar. But somehow, they felt important. His heart pounded in his chest as his hand started to shake. Damn, it's still happening, Naruto muttered, rubbing his temples. His conversation with Michaela hadn't helped. If anything, it had only made things worse. The symbols still flashed behind his eyes, crawling through his mind like a virus he couldn't shake. Just when he thought the sensation was about to overwhelm him, it stopped. Abruptly, no warning. No gradual fade, just silence. Then came a knock at the door. Naruto froze. He wasn't expecting anyone, and his roommate was out, off doing whatever it was he did. His body tensed instinctively. Something about the timing felt off. Still, he took a slow breath, pushing the tension down as he approached the door. His hand hesitated on the knob for only a second before he turned it. Pulling the door open with mild curiosity, though his guard was already up. Whoever was on the other side, he was ready. The door swung open, and Naruto barely had time to register his roommate, Leo, strolling in with a smirk, followed closely by a blonde girl, Alice. "Yo, man, you look like hell," Leo commented, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Did you sleep at all, or did you finally break and marathon all those conspiracy theory videos I told you about?" Naruto blinked, his mind sluggish as he tried to focus on Leo's words. No, just," his voice trailed off, and suddenly, his thoughts scattered. The symbols pulsed behind his eyes again, and before he could stop himself, he rambled, "It's like they're moving, shifting, I see them, but I don't know if I should." Leo frowned, "Dude?" Alice tilted her head, watching Naruto intently. "Are you feeling okay?" Her voice was smooth, almost too smooth. Naruto exhaled sharply, forcing himself to steady. Yeah, I'm fine." His tone came out normal this time, as if flipping a switch. Leo didn't look convinced, but Alice just smiled, stepping closer. "Maybe you're just overworked," she suggested, her voice soft but oddly calculating. Then Kurama's voice rumbled in Naruto's head, low and full of warning. "That girl. She's not human, she reeks of deception, and something else." Decepticon. Naruto's expression went from dazed to sharp in an instant. His muscles coiled, his chakra settling into a ready state. His eyes locked onto Alice, reading every subtle movement. She noticed. Her demeanor didn't change much, but he caught the flicker of realization in her eyes. She turned to Leo with a small, apologetic smile. "Hey, can you give us a second?" Leo blinked, confused. Why?" Alice's expression stayed pleasant, but her tone left no room for argument. "I'll just go." Leo glanced between them, clearly trying to figure out what the hell was going on. "Naruto?" Naruto didn't break eye contact with Alice. His voice was calm but firm. "Go, Leo." Leo barely had time to process what was happening before Naruto grabbed the door and slammed it shut in his face. "Damn, man, can I at least watch?" Leo's muffled voice called from the other side, completely misreading the situation. Naruto ignored him, his focus solely on Alice. His expression darkened, his patience running razor-thin. "So," he said, his voice low and edged with irritation, "are we cutting the crap now, or do you want to keep pretending you're just some random girl from campus?" Alice's smile didn't waver, but there was a noticeable shift in her stance, more guarded, more deliberate. "That's a pretty bold accusation." Naruto scoffed, rolling his shoulders like he was shaking off the lingering headache. "Yeah, funny how my instincts usually aren't wrong about things trying to kill me." His fingers twitched slightly, chakra humming just beneath his skin, ready to react the moment she made a move. Alice's gaze flickered to his hands, then back to his face. "You're different," she murmured, almost to herself. Naruto's jaw tightened. "No shit." The tension in the room thickened, both of them waiting for the other to make the first move. Alice tilted her head, her smirk still in place, but her eyes calculating. "You're a lot sharper than most humans," she mused. "Most don't even realize something's wrong until it's too late." Naruto crossed his arms, glaring. "Yeah, well, I'm not most people. So why don't you go ahead and tell me what you're really doing here before I lose what little patience I have left?" Alice let out a small chuckle, stepping forward just slightly. "What's the rush, Naruto? You and I could get along just fine if you weren't so tense." Her voice dipped slightly, an attempt at being sultry, but Naruto didn't so much as blink. "Yeah, I'm real sure that's what you're here for," he shot back dryly. "What, your boss send you to keep an eye on me, or were you just gonna kill me in my sleep?" Alice sighed, her playfulness vanishing. "It doesn't have to be like this, you know." Before Naruto could respond, another knock sounded at the door. It was firm, deliberate, nothing like Leo's usual impatient pounding. Naruto's eyes flicked toward the door, his irritation deepening. "Great," he muttered. "More surprises." Alice, however, didn't seem surprised at all. In fact, she smiled. "Go on," she said, stepping back. "Aren't you going to see who it is?" Naruto slowly reached for the door, his muscles tense, every instinct screaming at him that this was about to get a lot worse. He kept his eyes locked on Alice, watching for even the slightest twitch that might signal she was about to make a move. The second the door cracked open, his stomach dropped. Michaela. Of course, it had to be Michaela. The one person who would show up unannounced at the absolute worst time. The one person who, if she wasn't careful, was going to get herself killed just by standing here. She barely got a word out before Naruto gave her a pointed look. His expression was calm, too calm, but his eyes screamed something else entirely. "Shut up. Don't react. Play along." Michaela's brows furrowed just slightly, but she caught on quick. Naruto's hand was gripping the doorframe just a little too tightly. His shoulders were stiff. And the way he was angled, as if blocking her from seeing inside? Yeah. Something was very wrong. "Hey," she said, forcing her voice to stay neutral. "Did I, come at a bad time?" Naruto exhaled through his nose, schooling his expression into something relaxed, like he wasn't currently standing between his girlfriend and a goddamn Decepticon assassin. "Sort of," he said, voice easy, like nothing was wrong. "Wasn't expecting today." Michaela took that in, glancing past him, but he subtly shifted, blocking more of the doorway. "Don't look," he willed her, "don't let her know you know." "Well, Michaela started, but the words barely left her lips before the sickening sound of metal slicing through flesh filled the air. Naruto's body jerked. His breath hitched, a sharp exhale escaping him as the cold bite of a blade tore through his stomach, piercing through his jacket with terrifying ease. For a moment, everything froze. His gaze flickered downward, staring at the jagged steel protruding from his abdomen, crimson already seeping into his clothes. His fingers twitched, every nerve screaming in protest, but the pain hadn't fully registered yet. Then, the door swung open all the way. Michaela's breath caught as she took in the scene. Alice was no longer Alice. She crouched low, limbs contorted, synthetic flesh peeled away to reveal gleaming silver plating beneath. Her face was a twisted mockery of her human disguise, shifting and reforming as her long, segmented tongue retracted, revealing the grotesque mechanism at its core. The same tongue that had just lanced through Naruto's chest. Her lips curled into something that might have been a smirk if it weren't so inhuman. Naruto's mind raced, but his body was still catching up, still reeling from the shock of the wound. "Then, the hell is going on?" shouted Leo. Apparently he had still been there the whole time, that made this so much harder. Naruto barely registered his roommate's panicked voice before he heard him scrambling backward, his chair clattering to the floor. "Bro, what the hell is that?" Leo shouted, pointing at Alice with pure, unfiltered terror in his eyes. He looked from the blood dripping down Naruto's front to the twisted metal horror that had once been an attractive college girl. And his brain visibly short-circuited. Naruto clenched his jaw, shoving down the pain as best he could. Michaela took half a step forward, eyes wide with horror. Naruto forced himself to move, to push through the pain. He lifted his head, meeting her gaze. "Run." It was barely a whisper, but the weight behind it sent Michaela stumbling back a step. Alice's head snapped toward her, optics gleaming. Leo, still very much processing the absolute insanity happening before him, pointed wildly at Alice. Wait, should I be running too? Because I feel like I should be running. Naruto gritted his teeth, hand snapping up to grab hold of the blade impaling him. His grip was tight. Blood slicking his fingers, but he didn't care. He just needed to buy them a few seconds. Now, he barked. Michaela hesitated for half a heartbeat, too long. Alice's smirk widened. And then she moved. Before Alice could make a move, whether to chase after Michaela or Leo, Naruto's hand shot out like a blur. He grabbed her by the neck, his fingers tightening around the cold, smooth metal. Alice's transformation was complete, a grotesque, metal she-demon. Her once human form now a twisted nightmare of sharp edges and flowing metal locks, each one swaying as if they were alive, ready to strangle him. But Naruto wasn't about to let her get the upper hand, with a single, fluid motion. He twisted, pulling a kunai from his side. He hacked through her metallic tongue, the sound of metal rending echoing in the room. It dropped to the floor with a metallic clatter. Without hesitation, Naruto yanked the blade that had impaled him from his chest, feeling the raw pain surge through him as it tore free. He didn't have time to savor the pain. He swung his arm, throwing Alice's body away with enough force to send her crashing into the far wall. The room shook from the impact, but she was already shifting, transforming again into a monstrous form, her gaze burning with fury. Naruto wasted no time. His breath was ragged, but his body moved like it had a mind of its own. He rushed out of the room. The door slamming shut behind him with a loud bang. "Come on, we got to go," Naruto shouted, holding his bleeding wound with one hand. His mind was racing. He couldn't afford to think too much, couldn't afford to wait. Without a word, Michaela and Leo followed, their feet pounding against the floor as they sprinted after him. There was no hesitation. The danger was real. And they all knew it. The trio dashed through the quiet, dimly lit corridors of the campus, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they finally found themselves in a secluded part of the building, the library. The large, imposing doors to the library were slightly ajar, and Naruto pushed through them, his grip still tight on his side. The pain of his wound barely registering through the rush of adrenaline. He quickly scanned the room, noting the mostly empty space, save for a few late-night study-goers in the corners. With a glance back at Michaela and Leo, he motioned them to follow. "Get in here," he urged quietly. The door clicked shut behind them, the weight of the moment settling in as they found refuge in the silence of the library. Naruto didn't waste any time. As soon as he had the space, he leaned against one of the nearby shelves, taking a deep breath to steady himself. The blood from his wound was starting to stain his shirt, but the urgency in his voice cut through the moment. "All right," he began. Voice low but firm. "That wasn't just some random attack. That girl, she's a Decepticon spy." Michaela's face immediately turned pale. She had seen the raw violence in Alice's transformation, but hearing it out loud hit her like a slap to the face. Leo looked more confused than anything. "A Decepticon," Leo repeated, his brows furrowed in confusion. "What does that mean?" "You're telling me this whole time, I'm telling you she's not human," Naruto cut in sharply, locking eyes with Leo before turning his gaze to Michaela. "She's part of a group that wants something, the very thing I've been trying to avoid, keep away from everyone." Leo blinked, processing it all. Wait. You're telling me that thing is real? Like, actual robots from space trying to take over the world?" Naruto gave a grim nod, glancing briefly at Michaela before meeting Leo's eyes again. He didn't have time for Leo's disbelief, but he could tell it was sinking in. "So what, you're saying they're coming after you?" Naruto nodded again, but this time, Leo's face went white, his eyes flicking to the wound that had nearly killed Naruto earlier. He could see the blood that had soaked through his shirt, the metallic skin now replacing the damage, but it didn't ease his tension. "Hell no," Leo muttered, shaking his head. "I've only known you for a day, man. No way I'm getting dragged into this. I'm out." Before Leo could even make a move to leave, Michaela grabbed him by the arm, yanking him down to her level. Her expression was cold and serious, a far cry from her usual demeanor. She looked him dead in the eye. "You don't get it," she said, her voice low but firm. "They already know you've contacted Naruto. If you leave, you're as good as dead." Leo stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly torn between fear and disbelief. But he wasn't stupid, he knew enough to recognize when someone wasn't lying. Naruto could see Leo's mind racing, the fear creeping into his expression. It was natural. He had no clue what he was caught up in. And honestly, Naruto didn't want him to. But he didn't have a choice now. He didn't have time to watch Leo make sense of things. Instead, Naruto pulled out a scroll from his pocket, unfurling it with a swift motion. Michaela and Leo were both watching closely, though Naruto didn't care at the moment. His focus was on one thing: getting ready. He knew Leo would have questions, but there was no time to explain. As for Michaela, she'd seen one of these scrolls before. There was no need to drag this out. He didn't want to waste words on something that could easily cost them their lives. The moment they were found, it would be life or death, and right now, he needed weapons. Naruto let go of his wound, feeling the burn of his healing factor work its way through his body. The pain faded, and the hole in his chest sealed itself up. Once it was done, he slapped the seal on the scroll. Out came a blade, impossibly large, just as big as his body. He grabbed it by the hilt and set it down beside him with a grunt, the sheer weight of the blade making the ground beneath him shift slightly. Leo stared at the sword, his eyes wide in disbelief, clearly unsure of what the hell was going on. Naruto stood tall for a moment, allowing Leo to take in the sight, but his mind was already elsewhere. He turned to Michaela, noticing that she had a scroll of her own now, one he recognized. A gift from him. Given to her on one of her birthdays. Her gaze met his, and for a brief moment, there was a silent exchange between them. The scroll in her hands wasn't just any scroll, it was something he had put together for her protection. She'd promised to watch his back, and he'd made sure she had the tools to keep that promise. He loved her, but he hated losing every argument with her. The scroll contained various shinobi equipment, gear and techniques he'd taught her in the short time they'd known each other. With her natural instincts, she could take care of herself. He had faith in that. But the real key to it all were the specially designed shinobi gloves, ones he'd crafted himself. They weren't just for show, they allowed her to perform some of the things he could do, things that required fine control over chakra. He hadn't fully figured out the design yet. The gloves were still a prototype, prone to overheating after only a few uses. But in this moment, they could come in handy. Leo looked between the two of them, his expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. Okay, hold on," he said, running a hand through his hair. "What the hell is going on? One minute I'm trying to process robots and aliens, the next you're pulling out scrolls and weapons?" He threw his hands up in frustration, looking at Naruto and Michaela. "What is all this? Who are you people?" Naruto let out a tired sigh, looking at Leo. "I'm not exactly normal, but right now, we don't have time to explain every detail. All you need to know is that those robots, Decepticons, they want something, and we can't afford to let them get it." Leo blinked, still stunned, but nodded slowly. "Right, because that's totally normal. Suddenly, the silence in the library was shattered by a loud, deafening crash. The walls trembled as a figure burst through the front entrance, sending books flying in all directions. The robot assassin, Alice, now fully transformed, stood tall and menacing, her metal body gleaming under the harsh library lights. Her eyes glowing with deadly intent. Without hesitation, she pulled out twin blasters, opening fire. "Get down," Naruto yelled, his instincts kicking in. He leaped in front of Michaela and Leo, drawing the enormous blade from the scroll he had summoned earlier. The first wave of bullets ricocheted off the steel of his sword, creating sparks as they hit, but the sheer volume of firepower was overwhelming. "Move," he shouted again, his voice strained as he blocked the next barrage of shots with swift, calculated strikes. His body was already starting to feel the strain, but he couldn't afford to stop. Not with Michaela and Leo in danger. Michaela pulled Leo behind a nearby shelf. Her eyes wide as the chaos unfolded. Books scattered across the floor as other library patrons screamed and scrambled to escape the violence. Their panicked footsteps echoed throughout the hall. Naruto swung the blade with all his strength, knocking away another round of shots, but he was starting to lose his focus. The symbols, those damn flashing symbols, began reappearing in his mind, swirling violently, their incessant flashing making his head spin. His body was growing weaker with each passing second, and despite his best efforts, the overwhelming weight of the symbols caused him to stagger. "Get out of here," Naruto shouted through gritted teeth, his grip tightening around the hilt of his blade. He couldn't keep this up much longer. The room seemed to freeze for just a moment, and in that split second, Alice advanced, her blasters aimed directly at Naruto. Before he could even react, she lunged, knocking him off balance. One of her blasters found its mark, slamming into Naruto's side, knocking him backward. His sword was ripped from his hands as the force of the blast sent him crashing through the library wall, crumbling debris falling around him. Michaela and Leo watched in horror as Naruto disappeared from sight, buried under a pile of rubble. The dust settled, and a silence lingered in the air for a long moment. "No!" Michaela screamed, her breath catching in her throat as she bolted forward. But Leo grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Wait! It's too dangerous!" Leo shouted, but his voice was barely audible over the chaos unfolding around them. He too was frozen, unsure whether Naruto had survived the attack. Michaela's eyes burned with fury and panic as she struggled against Leo's grip. She couldn't just stand there and do nothing. "We need to get to him," she said, her voice sharp and determined. Michaela's heart raced as she rushed toward the gaping hole in the wall, Leo hot on her heels. The dust had barely settled, but the sight of Naruto buried under debris was enough to send a surge of adrenaline through her veins. "Naruto," she shouted, her voice hoarse as she pushed through the rubble, desperately searching for any sign of him. Her hands moved quickly, clearing the debris, and she found him, his body battered, bloodied, but alive, his chest slowly rising and falling. "Come on, we need to move," Michaela grunted, lifting him with Leo's help. They managed to drag him through the wreckage, their movements frantic as the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. The robot assassin wasn't far behind, and they had to get out of there, fast. Once they were clear of the library, Michaela didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the nearest parked car, breaking into the driver's side and pulling out a few wires under the dashboard. Leo stood guard, watching their backs as Michaela swiftly hotwired the car. Come on," she muttered under her breath, her fingers trembling with urgency. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. Without wasting another second, she threw the car into drive. As the tires squealed against the pavement, they raced away from the library. But before they could get too far, a massive crash sounded above them. Michaela glanced up in the rearview mirror to see Alice, now fully transformed into her metallic, demon-like form, leaping through the air, landing on the roof of the car with a bone-shaking thud. "Shit," Michaela cursed, swerving the wheel as Alice pounded her fists into the metal roof, making the car shake violently. Michaela fought to keep control of the car as she swerved between lanes, narrowly avoiding traffic, her heart hammering in her chest. "Leo, hold on," she yelled, her voice tight with panic. But Alice wasn't giving up. With a roar, she ripped off part of the roof, leaning down toward the front seat. Her mechanical eyes glinted with malice as she stretched out her hand to grab Michaela by the throat. In a desperate attempt to shake her off, Michaela swerved the car hard to the left, sending the vehicle careening toward a nearby streetlight. The impact was brutal, the force of the crash jolting Michaela against the steering wheel. But the move had the desired effect. Alice was knocked off the car, falling into the street with a harsh metallic clang. Michaela's pulse raced as she barely managed to keep the car from flipping. The moment Alice hit the ground, Michaela slammed her foot on the gas pedal, the car surging forward at full speed. The roar of the engine drowned out her thoughts as she swerved again, this time hitting the accelerator harder, aiming directly for the downed robot assassin. Michaela didn't flinch when she heard the sickening crunch of metal beneath the tires. It was over for Alice. She wouldn't be getting back up. Breathing heavily, Michaela kept her grip on the wheel, her eyes hard with determination. "We're not done yet," she muttered, glancing at Leo as he helped Naruto in the back seat. "We need to get out of here, now." 0-foot Michaela shouted, her eyes scanning the street as she maneuvered the stolen car with precision. Her foot pressing the pedal hard to escape the chaos. Leo was sitting in the passenger seat, his eyes wide in panic. "This is insane, what the hell is happening?" he screamed, gripping the dashboard as Michaela swerved around debris, narrowly avoiding oncoming traffic. But just as they were gaining some distance, a deep rumbling sound filled the air, growing louder by the second. Michaela's eyes widened, and she quickly glanced up through the rearview mirror. "Oh, shit," she muttered. A massive Decepticon helicopter was descending from above, its dark silhouette blotting out the sky. Its sharp, mechanical claws extended, and before Michaela could swerve out of the way, the helicopter latched onto the back of the car with a bone-rattling force. Leo let out a frantic scream as the car shook violently from the impact, and the once smooth ride became an unpredictable roller coaster. "Get it off, get it off," Leo screamed, clawing at the window. "We're gonna be dragged into the sky." Naruto, still dazed and barely conscious from the blow he'd taken earlier, groggily lifted his head from the back seat. His body ached, his head spinning from the events that had unfolded. He could barely focus, still reeling from the injuries, but the sound of Leo's frantic screams broke through the haze. "Wah!" Naruto's voice was hoarse as he tried to sit up straight, his hand instinctively going to his wound, which, to his surprise, felt completely healed. His head spun for a moment, vision blurring as his mind struggled to catch up. The car's violent shaking only made it harder for him to regain his bearings, and he saw the helicopter's claws tightening around the vehicle, preparing to lift them off the ground. "We're being dragged, Michaela, do something," Leo shouted. Michaela gritted her teeth, trying to keep control of the car as the helicopter began to hoist them into the air. "I'm trying, this thing's got a hold on us." But Naruto was barely holding on to consciousness, still feeling the aftereffects of his earlier injuries. His senses were foggy, and his chakra felt strange. He could feel something different, something more mechanical inside him. But he couldn't focus enough to make sense of it. The weight of the situation, the pressure of the Decepticon trying to take them all, was too much for him to handle in his dazed state. As the car was slowly lifted into the air, Naruto's vision began to blur again, his body sliding back into the seat as everything around him spun. Michaela, he muttered weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. Get us out of here. But his plea was lost in the chaos as the helicopter tightened its grip. Michaela didn't even respond immediately, she was too focused on keeping the car from flipping over. Leo, meanwhile, was too panicked to help, continuing to scream at the top of his lungs. Naruto's head fell back against the headrest, too drained to think clearly. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the gleaming metal claws of the Decepticon helicopter tightening around the car as it was lifted higher into the air. And then, nothing, the Decepticon helicopter continued to pull the car higher into the sky, the claws tightening around the vehicle with relentless force. Michaela's hands gripped the steering wheel as she desperately tried to keep control. But the car was barely staying together. The sound of metal creaking under pressure filled the air as the helicopter ascended, the weight of the vehicle dragging against the pull of gravity. Leo's frantic screams were drowned out by the roaring winds and the mechanical hum of the helicopter's engines. Michaela was struggling to keep her focus, her mind racing as she tried to come up with a plan. But just as they reached the apex, the helicopter suddenly released its grip, and the car was sent plummeting back toward the ground. Michaela gasped, her heart leaping into her throat as the world around her spun. The car twisted in the air, its descent a chaotic blur of metal and glass as they were sent hurtling toward the earth. The crash was inevitable. Hold on, Michaela yelled, her voice tight with panic as she gripped the wheel and braced herself for impact. The car hit the ground with a sickening thud, metal scraping against concrete as it skidded across the pavement before crashing through the roof of an abandoned warehouse. The entire structure shook as the car collided with the concrete floor below, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. Michaela, disoriented, felt the impact jolt through her body, her vision spinning. She could hear Leo groaning from the passenger seat, the car's airbags having deployed but not doing much to cushion the blow. Naruto, still unconscious in the back seat, had barely been able to react before the crash. His body slumping lifelessly against the seat. The chaotic noise of the crash finally died down, leaving only the eerie silence of the warehouse, the dust still hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Michaela shook her head, trying to clear her vision. Leo, you okay? She asked, her voice shaky but determined as she tried to focus. Leo groaned, his hand reaching up to rub his head. Yeah, I'm fine, he muttered, clearly dazed but alive. He looked over at Naruto, what about him? Michaela turned in the seat to check on Naruto. His body was limp, his face pale from the earlier wounds, but he was still breathing. She let out a sigh of relief, though it was short-lived. They were far from safe. And the Decepticons would be coming for them. We need to get out of here, Michaela muttered, her mind already planning their next move. But for now, they were trapped in the warehouse, the silence hanging heavily over them as they tried to regroup after the crash. The sounds of the helicopter's engines fading away were replaced by the close echo of giant footsteps. They weren't alone. Without warning, the car was sliced in half with a deafening screech, the sound of a massive razor tearing through the metal filling the air. Michaela barely had time to react before her side of the car was ripped away, her seatbelt yanked tight against her body as the vehicle split in two. Leo's side was thrown in the opposite direction, crashing against the jagged edges of the wrecked car. The force of the separation sent both of them scrambling to keep their balance, the chaos of the moment overwhelming. But it was Naruto, surprisingly, who wasn't where he should have been. His body, still unconscious, was thrown free from the wreckage, landing with a heavy thud on the cold, sodden floor of the warehouse. He hadn't been caught by either half of the car, he was left in the middle of it all, untouched but still out cold, as if fate had decided to spare him for the moment. Heavy breathing echoed through the warehouse, the sound reverberating in the tense silence. Michaela didn't have to look long to know who it came from. She turned to find Starscream, crouched just above them, his glowing red eyes glaring down with malice, ready to strike. He growled in Cybertronian, the harsh words an unintelligible blur to Michaela. If she hadn't been so terrified, the language might have been a curiosity. But fear gripped her, and the threat felt all too real. It wasn't until Starscream leapt, ready to pounce, that Naruto's eyes snapped open. In an instant, he was there, his form a blur of motion. With a swift movement, he appeared above the Decepticon, his giant sword materializing in his hand, its massive blade gleaming with deadly intent. The moment was barely a heartbeat, but it felt like eternity as Naruto's presence consumed the space. His intent clear as he prepared to strike down whatever threat dared approach. In the blink of an eye, Naruto was standing atop a downed Cybertronian, his eyes scanning the area for any other attackers. His mind raced. How long had he been out? Where was he? Hadn't he already taken down Starscream 2 years ago? But those questions vanished just as quickly as they had come. Before he could process anything further, it was as if reality itself had ripped him away. One moment, he was perched on Starscream's fallen form, the next he was violently yanked from his spot, crashing to a lower level of the warehouse, disoriented and momentarily stunned. Michaela screamed his name, her voice full of panic. While Leo could only stare in shock, unable to process what had just happened. What was that? Naruto thought to himself, struggling to get his bearings as he tried to stand, his grip slipping on his weapon. A low, raspy voice broke through his thoughts, filled with so much hatred it practically oozed from the air. I wouldn't do that, boy. Naruto's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes snapped up, searching for the source of the voice. The sight that met him made his blood run cold. Megatron, standing before him, looming with menace, his cold gaze locked onto Naruto. Megatron's cold, menacing voice rumbled through the dimly lit warehouse. You remember me, don't you? Naruto's lip curled into a sneer as he pushed himself to his feet. Yeah, I remember kicking your ass. His words were confident, but his body screamed in protest. Before he could react further, Megatron's massive hand shot out, sending Naruto hurtling back. The force of the impact slammed him into a nearby wall, the pain flaring across his body like a wildfire. Naruto groaned, trying to push himself up, but his entire body felt like it was made of lead. His vision swam slightly as he groaned in pain. Megatron's voice was a low growl, filled with venom. You've made a fool of me, human. The information the Allspark has embedded in your brain is the final piece I need. I will have my revenge. Naruto gritted his teeth, fighting through the pain. He had heard this speech before, but now, he had more to lose. If you think for 1 second I'll let you have it, you're out of your damn mind. His words were sharp, his gaze steely as he took a step forward. With a sudden burst of movement, Naruto lunged at Megatron, but to his horror, he realized that something was wrong. His body felt slower than usual, sluggish as he tried to strike. Megatron caught him midair with ease, his cold fingers gripping Naruto's body like a vice before slamming him hard into a nearby table, the wood splintering under the force. Naruto tried to struggle, but Megatron's fingers pressed down, pinning him in place. The sheer strength of the Decepticon was overwhelming. And all Naruto could do was groan as his body protested the movement. Michaela and Leo watched in stunned silence, horror spreading across their faces. Leo's hand clenched into a fist, as if wanting to do something, but knowing he was helpless in the face of what was happening. You feel it, don't you? Megatron's voice was thick with satisfaction as he leaned in closer, his face looming over Naruto. The poison, the one that assassin used. It's already spread throughout your body, blocking your chakra, weakening you. It won't be long before you're completely powerless. Naruto's eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat as he realized the truth of Megatron's words. There was poison when that she-devil attacked him. And it was working its way through him, making his body feel numb and slow. His chakra was barely a whisper inside of him. He tried to force it out, but it was like pushing against a stone wall. "You bastard," Naruto muttered, his voice thick with frustration. He gritted his teeth, trying to move despite the weight of Megatron's fingers holding him down. Megatron's laugh was cruel and low. "I'll enjoy killing you slowly. But first, we need to start something else." Naruto's heart pounded, the world spinning around him as he tried to push back against Megatron's hold. His mind raced. How was he going to get out of this? But as the poison spread and his chakra dwindled, his body felt heavier. And for the first time in a long time, he was truly powerless. Megatron's eyes gleamed with malicious delight as he looked down at Naruto, his grip tightening. "You'll suffer, human," he purred. "And when I'm finished, I'll make sure your brain is the last thing I claim from you." As he spoke, the sound of mechanical footsteps echoed behind him, and a small min icon, no taller than a child, appeared from the shadows. The Minicon scanner flared to life, hovering over Naruto's body, its little mechanical arms buzzing to life as it scanned every inch of him. It chirped in a series of clicks and whirs before the translation came through, sharp and precise. "Subject's brain holds valuable information. Extraction is required to fully access the Allspark's imprint." Naruto's heart dropped. Brain extraction? He had no idea how much longer he could stay conscious with the poison wreaking havoc on his body. Before Megatron could issue the command to proceed, a sudden roar of engines and the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps shook the warehouse. The ground trembled as Optimus Prime and Bumblebee descended from above, slamming into the scene with earth-shattering force. "Bumblebee, take the humans and get out of here," Optimus' voice rang out, strong and commanding as his optics locked onto Megatron. Michaela's heart pounded in her chest. Without hesitation, she grabbed Leo's hand and pulled him toward Bumblebee, who revved his engines in readiness. "Get in, now," Michaela shouted, pushing Leo into the passenger seat before climbing into the driver's side. Bumblebee shot out of the wreckage, kicking up dirt and debris as he sped off, narrowly dodging the explosions that followed. Meanwhile, Optimus and Megatron locked eyes. Their old rivalry flaring to life once more. Once again, Optimus, Megatron sneered, stepping back to stand beside Starscream. "You intervene at the wrong moment." Optimus stood firm, towering over Megatron. "This ends now, Megatron. Your reign of terror is over." As the two giants clashed, weapons flaring and energy blasts lighting up the darkened warehouse, Naruto's vision blurred. He could hear the sounds of battle around him, but his body was screaming at him to give up, to give in to the pain and fatigue. The poison had him on the edge, and his chakra felt like it was just out of his reach. But something within him stirred, a desperate spark of determination. He couldn't just let everything fall apart. Not like this. With a snarl, he pushed himself to his feet, his body sluggish but still moving. His vision focused on Optimus Prime, the towering Autobot leader, who was momentarily distracted by a blast from Megatron. Naruto leapt up, despite the weight on his limbs and the poison crawling through his veins. His sword appeared in his hand in an instant, and with a roar, he leapt onto Optimus' back, using the momentum to swing himself onto the Autobot like a rider mounting a horse. His sword held in a defensive stance, ready to assist however he could. At that moment, Optimus slammed himself into Megatron's and Starscream, sending both flying out of the warehouse, only to follow them. Starscream fled, but Naruto and Optimus focused on Megatron. Naruto forced his chakra out of his body, a sharp bit of pain coursing through him before he activated one of his jutsu. Naruto's body screamed in protest with every movement, but his resolve kept him going. The poison was still there, a gnawing presence at the edges of his consciousness, but he pushed through the pain, focusing on the fight at hand. He could feel the chakra inside him, thin and brittle, but it was enough, just enough, for what he needed to do. With a sharp exhale, Naruto slammed his hands together, gathering the last of his chakra despite the burning sensation in his chest. The jutsu he prepared was low-level, nothing fancy. Just a quick burst of wind to give him an opening, wind style, gale palm. He called out through gritted teeth, the air around him swirled, a powerful gust ripping through the warehouse, cutting through debris and sending any loose objects flying. The force of the wind slammed into Megatron's chest, knocking the Decepticon back just enough to disrupt his assault on Optimus. Naruto grimaced, the pain in his body flaring with each exertion, but he couldn't stop now. He wasn't about to let Megatron have the upper hand again. Optimus, sensing the opening, took full advantage. With a mighty roar, he slammed his shoulder into Megatron's midsection, sending the Decepticon flying through the warehouse wall and into the open air. The crash reverberated through the building as Megatron staggered to his feet, a mixture of fury and surprise in his glowing red optics. Starscream, always the coward, took that moment to retreat, his jet engines roaring as he fled into the sky. Naruto didn't let his guard down for a second. He kept his sword drawn, his stance firm, watching Megatron like a hawk. Optimus, equally resolute, stood tall beside him. The two of them were a force to be reckoned with, even if Naruto's strength was waning. Is that all you've got, Megatron? Naruto sneered, wiping the blood from his lip. His voice was hoarse, but his spirit was far from broken. Megatron's optics flashed bright red. You are nothing more than a nuisance. Human, he growled, his voice low and venomous. But your interference will cost you dearly. Naruto didn't flinch. I've had worse. Before Megatron could launch another attack, Naruto forced the last bit of chakra left in his system through his body. The pain hit him like a tidal wave, but he focused all his energy on the jutsu he needed to finish this, Rasengan. He shouted. In an instant, a swirling ball of blue chakra formed in his palm. Despite the poison coursing through his veins and the weight of exhaustion pulling at him, he threw the Rasengan straight at Megatron with everything he had. The sphere hit the Decepticon with an explosive force, sending shockwaves through the surrounding area. The impact was deafening. Megatron's armor cracked, and he staggered back, visibly shaken. Even as the Decepticon reeled from the attack, Naruto's strength rapidly drained. He collapsed to one knee, gasping for air, his vision growing hazy. The poison and exhaustion were starting to take their toll, and he knew he couldn't keep fighting much longer. Decepticons, attack! Megatron roared, his voice full of malice. In an instant, Starscream and the helicopter transformer from before appeared, flanking Megatron with lethal precision. The two Decepticons charged in, the air thick with the sound of their engines as they prepared to strike. Naruto was thrown off Optimus in that moment. The world spun as his body collided with the ground, pain shooting through him with every movement. His breath hitched in his chest as he struggled to stay conscious. He could barely push himself to his hands and knees, but his gaze remained locked on Optimus. The fight was turning. Megatron was too strong, and now with his reinforcements, Optimus was starting to lose ground. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest, but the pain, the poison, and his fading chakra all left him powerless to intervene. He could only watch helplessly as Optimus struggled against the combined forces of Megatron and his followers. The sound of clashing metal and gunfire filled the air, and it felt like everything was slipping away. Optimus, Naruto murmured, his voice barely audible. Naruto was forced to watch as Optimus fought for his life. Each attack came one after another, relentless and unforgiving. Starscream focused on long-range strikes, swooping in from above, while Megatron and the other Decepticon attacked from the ground, closing the distance with brutal precision. Optimus was staggered by each blow, his once imposing frame starting to show signs of wear. The once unyielding Autobot leader was beginning to falter. He blocked, he dodged, but it was never enough. The Decepticons were closing in, and Optimus's movements were slowing. Megatron's voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. That boy holds the Allspark's knowledge. Prime. Don't you realize that means he could lead us to a new energon source? Optimus gritted his teeth, pain etched across his face. One human life for the rest of Cybertron, he snarled, defiant even in the face of overwhelming odds. You're wrong. Despite the toll the fight was taking, Optimus's resolve only seemed to harden. 2 energy blades materialized in his hands, and with a roar, he turned the tide of the battle. He wasn't going to go down without a fight. The air crackled with energy as he slashed and stabbed, a blur of motion as he pushed back against the Decepticons. His speed was almost too much for them to handle. Starscream was forced to retreat, trying to avoid the onslaught of Optimus's blades, while the other Decepticons struggled to keep up. Naruto watched, his body aching and weak, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. For the first time in what felt like forever, the Autobots were winning. The Decepticons were on the defensive, and Optimus was making them pay for every mistake they'd made. But just as the balance shifted, the unthinkable happened. Megatron, watching carefully from the shadows, waited for his moment. Optimus, blinded by his fury and determination, didn't notice until it was too late. With a swift, lethal motion, Megatron sneaked up behind the Autobot leader, driving his cannon through Optimus's chest. The sound of metal tearing and the hiss of energy igniting filled the air. Optimus's optics widened as the cannon discharged, blasting a hole straight through his chest. "You're weak," Megatron sneered, stepping back to admire the damage. Optimus staggered, barely staying upright. His body shook with the effort to remain standing, but it was clear that his strength was fading. Blood, well, energon, poured from the wound, staining the ground beneath him. Naruto's heart sank as he watched the leader of the Autobots, the symbol of hope and strength, slowly crumple to his knees. His fists clenched, nails digging into his palms, but his body betrayed him, unable to react in time. He was too weak, too drained from the fight to help. "Optimus," he whispered, helpless. Optimus's optics dimmed, but even in his final moments, his voice remained steady, "Naruto, run." And with that, Optimus Prime fell, his massive frame crashing to the ground with a deafening thud. "No!" Naruto yelled, his voice raw with fury and pain. His body flared with the last remnants of chakra, his blonde hair flickering with energy as he rushed toward Megatron. His sword appeared in an instant, crackling with the power of all 5 elements as he slammed it into the ground. "I won't let you win." The ground beneath him cracked and splintered as he summoned chakra from every corner of his being. Flames erupted from his body, swirling around him in a vortex of scorching heat. Wind surged, lightning crackled in the air, and water condensed into vapor, each element forming around him in an unstoppable storm. "Take this!" Naruto yelled, launching a barrage of jutsu at Megatron. Fireballs shot forward, crackling with intense heat, while torrents of water surged toward the Decepticon, freezing as they collided with the air's sharp cold. Lightning arced toward Megatron's massive frame. But the Decepticon leader was too powerful. He dodged and blocked with ease, deflecting the attacks with blasts of his own. Naruto pushed harder, the pain in his body mounting. His limbs felt like lead, his breath shallow, but he refused to stop. He summoned more chakra, unleashing a storm of attacks from every direction. He launched Earth-style jutsu that shattered the ground beneath them, sending jagged rocks flying. Wind-cutting blades of air followed, slashing through the battlefield, aiming for Megatron's weak points. But with every attack, Naruto's body grew weaker. His breathing became erratic, and the poison coursing through his veins spread further. The familiar, sharp pain of his chakra being drained pulsed through him. And with a sickening realization, he felt it, his chakra was fading. His connection to it was slipping away. No, he whispered, panic rising in his chest. He couldn't feel it anymore. The chakra that had been his lifeblood was slipping from his grasp. He pushed harder, desperation fueling his every move, but his body was betraying him. Megatron didn't wait for Naruto to recover. With a savage swipe, the Decepticon slammed Naruto to the ground, pinning him beneath his enormous foot. Foolish human, Megatron spat, his voice filled with venom. You can't fight what you can't control. Naruto struggled, gasping for air, his vision fading as the poison spread even further. He tried to call on his chakra. But it was gone, completely gone. His limbs were heavy, unresponsive, and his body felt like it was on fire. He couldn't even lift his head. Before Megatron could finish him off, a massive explosion the battlefield. Naruto's thoughts barely registered the booming sound, but the Autobots had arrived. In the chaos, Megatron was forced to back off, his focus momentarily shifted as the sound of Autobots rushing into the fray filled the air. Rachel, and the others, let off blast after blast, separating Naruto from Megatron without a word. The Autobots surged into battle, forcing Megatron and his Decepticons to retreat. In the confusion, Naruto was lifted from the ground, his weakened body barely able to support itself. I'm not done yet, Naruto managed to murmur, trying to stand, but his legs gave out beneath him. His vision blurred, the poison working its way further into his system. You've done enough for today, Ironhide said softly, his grit tone getting close as they pushed Megatron and Starscream back. Before Naruto could protest, he was lifted by Bumblebee, who sped off toward the exit. As the Autobots continued to fight Megatron and his forces, the retreat began. Megatron glared, enraged at the loss, but he didn't pursue them. Not yet. The Autobots pulled back, with Naruto unconscious in Bumblebee's care, as the battle raged on behind them. That's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, all KAGE, out.